It was a nice day, and my 5-year-old son James is playing outside in the backyard. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends growing up, but he has always had a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was he could be talking to. Could he have made a friend, I thought? Being a single mom, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and check on him. When I went into the backyard, I was a bit confused because James was the only person back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I heard another voice. I told him,
James, it's time to come inside.
He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a sandwich.
James, were you talking out there?
I asked. James looked up for a moment. I was playing with my friend. Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you ask him to have lunch with us? He stared at me for a moment.
His name's Laughing Jack.
I was a bit taken away by what he said.
Oh, that's strange. Is that his name? What does your friend look like? I was a bit confused.
He answered,
He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly clown nose. He's got long arms and a baggy pants with striped socks. And he smiles.
I realized my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it is normal for kids these days to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. Then it started to get late. I put James to bed, I tucked him in and gave him a kiss, and made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark. I was in some kind of rundown amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and an abandoned game hunts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prize stuffed animals all hung from noses in the game huts. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't even a single soul. Then suddenly I began to hear music, the sounds of when a squeeze box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tuned circus tent almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight, shining on the center of a big top. As I walked towards the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing along, unable to stop.
All around the Mario bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey threw a twirl, it was fun.
Then the music stopped. Suddenly the light shot on, and then the intensity of the lights was practically blinding. All I could see was a small, dark sail-light shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared, and another one, and another. There was dozens of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move my legs. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch their haunting figure drew near. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each other, I noticed they were horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their bodies, others were severely burnt, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children clawed at my flesh, dragging at the ground and tearing inside my flesh. As the children tore me apart, I faded away. All I could hear was laughter, horrible, evil laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw a few of James' action figures were positioned facing me on top of my nightstand. I sighed. James, was that you? I gathered up the toys, made my way to James' room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed his toys back into his toy box and headed out the living room. A little while, James woke up and I made his breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about his toys.
James, honey, did you put the toys in Mommy's room?
His eyes shot up for me in a moment, then quickly glanced.
Laughing Jack did.
I rolled my eyes and responded,
Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room.
James nodded and finished his breakfast, then decided to go play out in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room and I almost dozed off because I woke up a few hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. I was a bit worried. It had been over 2 hours. I hadn't checked on him. I went to go step out into the backyard, but James wasn't there anymore. I was getting nervous, so I called out to him, "James, James, where are you?" Just then I heard a giggle from the front yard. I rushed through the gate around the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk.
What are you eating?
James looked up at me and then reached in his pocket and pulled out his hand full of candies. This made me very nervous. "James, please tell Mommy where you got the candy from." He hung his head down and said,
Laughing Jack gave it to me.
My heart sunk. I kneeled down to look at him in the eyes. He is not real. He gave me the damn candy.
But Mama, Laughing Jack did give me the candy.
I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James has never lied to me, but he's telling me the impossible. I make him spit out the candy and I throw the rest away. James appears to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, could he have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door? Or Mr. Walker down the street? Either way, I'm getting a close eye out on James. That night, I put James to bed as usual. I decided to go to bed early myself. Suddenly, I woke up from a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had turned on down to the floors, and our dog Fido hung dead from the light fixtures. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier. My shock was quickly broken and sharp screams coming from James' room followed, and loud crashes. I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with the speed that only a mother whose child is in danger could have. I burst through the door and flickered on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed crying and shaking with fear. A pool of urine staining the beds. I scooped my child up and ran out of the house and went to the next door to Tom and Linda's. Luckily, they were still awake. They let me use their phone and I called the police. It didn't take them long to arrive and I explained what had happened to them. They looked at me as if I was crazy. They searched the house, but all they could find was a dead dog and 2 trash rooms. The officer told me that someone had probably gotten into their house, done this right before a quick escape when they heard me coming up the stairs. I knew it was true. All the doors were locked and none of the windows were open whatsoever. The next day, James stayed inside. I didn't want him outside of my sight. I went to the garage and found his old baby monitor and set up his room if anything comes into it tonight. I was going to be able to hear it. I went into the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from the drawer and put it on my nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting anything hurt my little boy. Soon enough, night came and I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised him I wasn't going to let nothing hurt him. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and turned on the nightlight. Before closing my door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could, but after hours, I felt myself drifting off. My baby would be safe in the night, but I needed to sleep myself. Just as I laid my head down on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor. At first, it sounded interference, like the kind of a radio would make. Then it turned to a soft moan. Was James sleeping, I thought to myself. Then I heard it. The laugh from my nightmare. The horrible laugh. I sprung up from the bed and grabbed my knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James and I swung open the door. I turned on the lights. I took one step in and I could feel the warm, thick liquid on my feet. Suddenly, James' nightlight came on and I could see the absolute horror laid out in front of me. James' body was nailed up on the wall, the nails piercing through his hands and his feet. His chest was cut open. His organs were hanging out. His eyes and his tongue had been removed. I was disgusted. I could hardly breathe. That was my baby boy. James was still alive. My poor baby boy. I ran across the room and vomiting on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by horrible, cackling moan. I spun around while whimpering from my mouth. Then out the shadows emerged a fiend responsible for all the horrors.
Laughing Jack.
His ghost white skin and a matter of black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes. His twisted smile revealed a war, sharp, jagged teeth, and his skin didn't look like skin at all. It almost looked like rubber or plastic. I shouted, get away, bastard!" The knife from above my head. I swung it, but I missed. The knife passed right through and pierced James. His heart was still beating. The splash, Warm blood was all over my face. No, what have I done? My baby. I killed my baby. I immediately fell to my knees and I couldn't hear sirens in the distance anymore because of my fear. Then the police arrived to find me, the one in front of my son, still wielding the knife covered in my baby's blood. The trial thought.